I'd just like to take a moment to welcome everybody tonight. So good evening to everyone. Welcome to our all-party debate on agriculture, where we're going to shape Nova Scotia's future together. My name is Alicia King. I'm the first vice chair of the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture, and I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This land is part of Mi'kma'ki, covered by the Peace and Friendship Treaties. We are all treaty people. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone joining us, both here in person and online. Your participation highlights the significance of this discussion as we explore the future of agriculture in our province. Before we begin, I would like to share regrets from our president, Alan Melvin, who could not be with us here today. He's currently in British Columbia, participating on a nationwide panel on the protection of agricultural land for future generations at the Farm Management Canada and BC Young Farmer Conference. We appreciate his commitment to advocating for agriculture on a national scale and look forward to hearing about the panel upon his return. We are pleased tonight to have Jolene McCachran as our moderator for today's debate. Jolene is no stranger to the industry and is known both for her work with Dalhousie University Faculty of Agriculture, as well as being a dedicated farmer with her husband and family. Her experience and insight make her well suited to guide the important conversation. Thank you, Jolene. We're also pleased to have CBC here with us tonight as well. And I'll take just a moment to thank the candidates for joining us this evening. We've got the Honourable Greg Morrow from the Progressive Conservative Party of Nova Scotia, Lisa Lachance, I guess I should probably go in order, Gwyn Bellefontaine from the Nova Scotia Liberal Party, and Lisa Lachance from the Nova Scotia NDP. I'm going to pass things over to Jolene. She's going to review the guidelines, and then we'll get started on tonight's event.
Just going to pull this up a little bit. Thank you, Alicia. I'm happy to be here. This is going to be fun, I think. We'll see. To ensure tonight's debate runs smoothly and fairly, here are a few guidelines that we'll be following. So we had a random draw to determine the speaking order for tonight for party introductions, and that speaking order will rotate then for responses to each question based on this initial draw. We will start with 5 prepared questions, which should take us to approximately 8:15 p.m. After this, we will open the floor for questions from our audience here in the room and from our audience online. We plan to wrap up the discussion around 8:45 to allow for a brief networking with the event concluding at 9 o'clock. I will try my best to keep us on time. I can be scary when I have to be. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question initially. Following the initial response, each candidate will have a minute for a rebuttal to close the discussion. Only NSFA registered firms will be allowed to ask questions during the open floor segment. Please come to the mic for those of you in the room and introduce yourself by name, your firm name, and the county that you represent. To maximize participation, we ask that you keep your preamble and question brief. We will make efforts to cover a variety of topics and balance between the in-person and online questions to ensure diverse discussion. For those of us joining online, please submit your questions in writing using the chat or the Q&A function. We have a couple of folks at the front table here who will be managing that section. Thank you for your attention. We look forward to a productive and respectful debate. I am now going to allow each candidate a maximum of 5 minutes for their introduction. And the first in order is our PC candidate, Greg Morrow.
Thank you, Jolene and Federation, Carolyn, for setting this up. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces in the room tonight. Don't have any prepared remarks to start, but as many of you know, I'm had the honor of serving as a Minister of Agriculture for the province of Nova Scotia for the last 3 years. I was appointed. I was also a new MLA, so steep learning curve for sure, but I've had the benefit of a good relationship with farmers and with NSFA. I know Carolyn came into her role at the same time, so we've kind of been learning together. And with the 2 presidents so far, Tim Marsh, your past president, and Alan Melvin, of course, your current president. Proud of what we've accomplished over the last 3 years. Spent a lot of time on farms, a lot of time. It's my favorite place to be. I'd much rather be on a farm than sitting in a boardroom. When you have a chance to talk to someone one-on-one, you can really hear what the issues are and how you can help. And sometimes not helping is just simply getting out of the way. So proud of what we've done for 3 years. Looking forward to what we can continue to do in the future. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jolene. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Next in line is Gwyn Bellefontaine from the Liberal Party.
Hello, and thank you for welcoming me to this conversation about agriculture. It's a subject that I tend to be quite passionate about. My name is Gwyn Bellefontaine. I am local to Nova Scotia. In fact, I grew up in Middle Musquodoboit, and I represent the Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley riding. I grew up on a dairy farm, so supply management, I know. My education is in agriculture. I went to University of Guelph and studied my agricultural business diploma and a plant science, studied in plant science degree. After that, I was in marketing, communications, and agriculture as an entrepreneur. And then lately I've moved back home. I am involved in the Middle Musquodoboit Agricultural Society and also with the Halifax County Exhibition, also getting involved in the Canadian Association of Fairs and Exhibitions. It thrills me to no end that there are over 2,000 registered farms with the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture. I can only imagine the diversity of farms and farm businesses that are producing the food and farm products that we all enjoy. What is disappointing is that the Federation and its members have had to try to make do with the lack of resources and funding with this current PC government. The Nova Scotia Liberal Party has included agriculture in the party platform. But in looking at the PC and NDP platforms, there is no mention of agriculture or rural or anything related to farm and farm products in their platform. A Liberal government strategy will help to build on the programs and services that the Federation outlined in its mandate. This includes investing in agriculture to ensure we remain sustainable. We want to support local. So let's work on the Nova Scotia Loyal program with a strategy to position farmers to profit through a coherent, doable action plan in which farmers profit from the sale of their products, the reward being more dollars in the hands of producers rather than paying a local grocery chain to offer a few points towards the next purchase. This money could then be put toward marketing and growth of local products. This program could also fit into the Liberal Party platform to ban covenants that restrict where grocery stores can be built, having an independent grocer in rural communities that can easily access and purchase Nova Scotia products should be the norm to allow consumers the option to purchase fresh local. Having the ability to make a phone call without losing cellular reception would be nice. The Liberal Party platform would increase cellular reception along the 100 series highways, which when working in a field in Annapolis Valley, it would be nice to know that the local tractor repair shop from the field will reach beyond the tractor cab, or God forbid, an emergency call to 911. Although I'm told the 7 cellular towers erected in Guysborough County are a great asset to the forestry industry and ATV riders in the area, I would say that maybe the one tower that got erected in Annapolis doesn't quite reach beyond the South and North Mountains. You can count on the Liberal government to work with the Federation of Agriculture and its members to build a stronger Nova Scotia that reflects the importance of agriculture in rural Nova Scotia. Ask yourself if you are better off today than you were when Tim Houston took over. If not, consider the alternatives.
Now we'll ask NDP candidate Lisa Lachance.
Good evening. Thanks so much for being here and for joining online. I'm thrilled to be part of this really important discussion about an essential part of our province, an essential sector in our province. You know, I think the cornerstone of rural communities, holding family homes and family businesses, as well as sharing a real commitment to community well-being and food security for all Nova Scotians. I've been thrilled to be the agriculture spokesperson for the Nova Scotia NDP since 2021. And I think it really, I've appreciated a number of things. One is the complexity of the industry. So, obviously on the front lines of climate change, on the front lines of technical development and investment, as well as really facing the affordability challenge that we've seen over the last few years. And I know that hasn't been easy. Farmers are being squeezed and Nova Scotians are being squeezed. And one of the things we're seeing are incredibly rising rates of food insecurity. And I know nobody wants that, especially the folks in this room. One of the first bills that I introduced was the Agriculture, Food and Security Secretariat Act, which is still in the books and intended to be a way of bringing together departments across government to really have an all-of-government commitment to the agriculture sector. I have lived in Nova Scotia since 1988, and we lived in Canning at that time. I was just a baby, I'm kidding. And it also gave me a chance. I worked on a dairy farm for a couple of years, and picked many different things like apples, blueberries, corn, etc. And also worked overseas and did some working holiday work where I've picked and packed just about every crop that you can think of. We now have a hobby farm in Perot, and we're working on reclaiming some fallow agricultural land by planting an orchard. So that's, my commitment comes from I know what it is like to live in a rural community. I know what it is like not to have cellular reception from places where you'd like to know you were safe to have it. And that's, one of the reasons why I've enjoyed working with this sector in particular, and also a really well-organized sector, I have to say. So it's really great in terms of reaching out to stakeholders. And I don't think this government has supported Nova Scotia farmers. One-off programs such as the polar vortex support, of course, were needed, but government has failed to commit to the predictable and commitment needed to the sector. So the sector has very clearly said we need predictable and ongoing support. So polar vortex, hurricanes, floods, fires, the impacts of climate change are real. You know that. You're adapting all the time. And so we really need to listen to the sector and think about, access to insurance, access to technology, and access to support for succession planning. I think we also, we're deeply disappointed by the buy local program. If we remember what we were promised in 2021, we were promised something that would accomplish a shift in consumption in this province. And in that way would help with food security and would help with the stability of the agriculture sector. There was really a shared commitment. It was a collective process. And we know there's so much potential. So things like procurement and institutions. And that's not all what we got. A sole source contract was given to Sobeys to design a program that's for them. I mean, it's a reward program for their reward points, and it's not for farmers. I think the farm market vouchers were one aspect that is really positive, but not enough to signal a long-term strategy for the agriculture sector in Nova Scotia. I'd also like to say that we've, the food and beverage strategy is really MIA. So we, had consultations around that and a report, but we haven't seen the results. So we have a commitment to working with industry in a transparent and respectable way. We think that would be really important for strengthening the sector.
Okay, on to the meat of our program. Pardon the pun. I told Carolyn I would tell one joke while I was up here. Our first question then goes out to our Liberal candidate for the first position to answer. Nova Scotia's agricultural ecosystem. Nova Scotia's farms have been operating at a loss for the past 7 years, with projections indicating even deeper challenges and rising debt for industry. The provincial government offers plenty of programs available to support farmers, but they are often underfunded and oversubscribed by farmers. How can the provincial government find more resources and improve the spending provided by the department?
Thanks for that question. It has been tough in the farming sector. It's always been tough in the farming sector, but at this point, working harder is not getting anyone ahead. Farmers need to make money to succeed. You know that. I know that. And in the last 3 years, the government has had a $4.4 billion increase in revenue, but it was unfortunate that the current government chose not to support the challenges that agriculture is facing. In speaking with Zach Churchill, he's committed to sit down with the industry to work together to best support the industry. The current provincial budget is $16.5 billion, of which the agriculture industry receives only $46 million. In 2021, when the Liberals were last in government, had a budget of $46 million. In essence, the current Department of Agriculture's budget has remained fixed, even when with this 39% increase in revenues. PC government has had much more physical capacity to help with agriculture than has been provided, yet they chose not to increase funding to the Agriculture Department to support the challenges that farmers are facing. The question, states underfunded and oversubscribed by farmers. If there are billions of possibly misdirected dollars that are not reaching the Department of Agriculture, then where is it going?
Thank you, Gwen. We'll now offer the opportunity to the NDP candidate to respond.
Great, thank you. And I'll actually pick up where my Liberal colleague left off in terms of, underfunded and oversubscribed. So it's really clear that this government is failing to support the agricultural sector in the face of, as I've said before, in terms of, climate change and the stresses that you have faced over the past few years. And I think if you have a government program that's underfunded and oversubscribed, and if key stakeholders in the sector are asking for something more predictable and more consistent, then I think it's important to listen. So I think we need to listen. The Growing Together report is a great example of a sector-led initiative that clearly outlines the need for better access to insurance, better access to no-interest loans, looking at using technology more, but also as part of a labor stability approach. Procurement commitments from the provincial government would be an important part of helping that shift to local consumption and again to a stable market for Nova Scotia farmers in Nova Scotia. I think at the last Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture AGM, the minister was asked to release exact numbers on school food procurement. And, even with the nascent school food program, we don't know yet what the buy local commitment is of that program. And that's a great example of where we need to be making the consumer shift.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Next up, a PC candidate.
Thank you. I would point to some of the highlights that we've had over the last 3 years. Under my leadership as minister, we saw an increase of 25% to the federal-provincial agreement, the new agreement, Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership. That was the first such increase in the history of the federal-provincial deal. And my Liberal counterpart talked about budget increases, and one thing that she didn't mention is that I believe it was this very forum where our then PC leader was asked about having a dedicated Minister of Agriculture as opposed to being combined with fish, and we did separate those two departments. So with that separation, obviously, budgets change, and I believe I started with a budget of around $40 million, so it is up to $46 million in 3 years. Previous fiscal year, our budget increased 12%, and that was among the top 5 of all departments in government. So we're talking about some heavy hitters there: health, community services, justice. So we've had back-to-back budget increases. We talk about direct provincial support to farmers in the face of disaster, $43 million direct over the last 2 years. Those are a few examples of how we're investing. If a particular program is oversubscribed, we're happy to look at other buckets within that agreement where it may be undersubscribed and we can move money around. We're always happy to have that discussion. And on the topic of institutional procurement, we've done a lot of work in long-term care, in education, and in our hospitals.
Thank you. On to the next question. Youth and farming. How can industry and government work together to support Nova Scotia's youth in overcoming the high barriers to entry in farming, such as rising land values essential to aging farmers' retirement plans, while also providing competitive wages and robust skills training programs to help both those aspiring to own farms and those pursuing careers in agriculture that support farm owners? I first offer up the NDP candidate for response.
Great, thank you. So I think one thing that would really help establish the importance to young people of the agriculture sector is actually a clear agricultural strategy from this government and a clear commitment to the long-term sustainability and stability of the sector. So I do actually think that that matters when, if young people are making inquiries about, studies and careers and work, and all they're hearing is that the sector is struggling and not seeing the long-term strength and resilience, then I think that affects how young people want to engage in their careers. I also think there's a lot of room to enhance the agriculture career education in schools. I think there's a lot of room to improve on our curriculum around local food and agricultural production. I think we need to look at the enrollment trends at Dal Ag and see about what incentives might be necessary there to get students at Dal Ag. I also think, thinking about things like land banks, access to no interest loans, mentorships, specific programs that work with underrepresented communities in the farming sector, all those things are really important as well, because we want young people to see their future in agriculture. We want young people to see their future in rural communities.
Thank you. Now offer it to the BC candidate.
Thank you. One of the first things that I established when I came in was the Minister's Youth Council for Agriculture, and I see a couple charter members in the back. Always glad to have that input from young people, of course, they're the future of the sector. So that's a direct line. And from that council came a couple of key programs. The Plant Your Roots program was launched previous November, support new ownership of commercial farms. And also just as recently as July, the Young Farmer Mentorship Program was requested by the Youth Council. So supports arm-length membership or relationships to support young farmers with their farm business development goals. And I would agree that we need to do a better job in our schools of teaching this industry as a viable option. It wasn't available for me when I was younger. And we've done some work in agriculture in the classroom. We have Agricultural Literacy Month where myself and other folks from the department have gone into schools and done the Plant Your Seeds, where young kids can plant seeds. They learn about how they grow and what they need to do to make them grow, and it really opens their eyes to agriculture. We talk about stuff that they might be growing at home, and then they watch those seeds grow through the rest of the school year. Really impressed with what's going on at Dal AC in terms of programs, things that weren't viable options maybe 20 years ago. You can have a path in computer science and work in agriculture. That wasn't always an option. So every time I go to Dal AC, I'm impressed by what they're doing there and how it can translate into new careers in the sector.
Thank you. Gwyn?
So this is a question that's on the minds of every farmer looking to hire a summer student, every local exhibition, where are the younger generation of farmers and community volunteers? If it weren't for 4-H, I would not be in this position. I learned public speaking at an early age from speeches and demonstrations every year. But the 4-H program has recently seen reduced funding from a major sponsor, yet they persevere to provide a learning experience for every young person involved in the program. 4-H in Nova Scotia has been making changes to their program since the pandemic. There's been an increase in members that learn to do by doing. Many of the projects are not directly related to 4-H, to farming, but the beef, dairy, goat, sheep clubs and others like it are teaching and reaching the goals of educating youth about hard work and accomplishment. Promoting the Young Farmers Forum which is recently, almost a year ago, was hosted in this very hotel, discussing how to cultivate your future. So it's young farmers forums that are trying to come up with the solutions. So reaching out to the youth in this program regarding a future in agriculture may sometimes seem defeatist, especially if agriculture is facing such hardships. This is not how we want our young farmers to start out as discouraged about an industry. We need to build the excitement of farming into the younger generation as something to be proud of. Our local exhibitions are prime examples of promoting agriculture. This is where everyone gets to see how agriculture affects their life through the products generated by our farmers. Again, I bring this question back to the increased revenue of the current government and their lack of foresight in seeing that the average age of farmers in Nova Scotia is, I think, 58 years old.
Thank you, Gwyn. Okay, I'm going to offer the chance for the NDP to respond.
Thank you. And I guess I would just really want to hear clearer from the minister about the strategy that this government has for the agriculture sector, because I think, you know, it's important to have the, you know, curriculum in the youth council, but, you know, we haven't seen this government commit to land trusts as a key part of succession planning. And we haven't heard this government commit to no interest loans in the ways that they can help. And the budget increase that the minister speaks of was actually all underserved the emergency funding to respond to climate change related events. And that's where I really think we need to think about how we build that in, so farms don't have to wait till the end of the fiscal year to get end of fiscal money from a government that you know administers it in all sorts of different ways. I think we need predictable, stable funding for the sector.
I'm happy to talk about those things. I know some of them are topics for later questions, but in terms of the strategy, we've when I talk about the things that we've done over the last 3 years, and again, we'll get into different things like business risk management. You know, those plans are ongoing. They'll continue when, you know, after the election. And in terms of spending, like we've invested, as I mentioned, we've shown that we're willing to do that. We'll continue to do that. And we'll continue to work with industry. That's what we've done for the last 3 years. Industry's had a good relationship, and we'll continue to do that. They'll help us inform what we do going forward.
Thank you. Gwyn, do you have a response to that? Okay. Moving on to the next question. Protecting agricultural land. There are mounting development pressures on high-quality agricultural land across the province. 5% of Nova Scotia's land mass is actively farmed, and fertile soil is a scarce resource that we lose for good once it's developed. How will your party balance the need to protect our fertile agricultural land while ensuring that communities get the housing they need?
Thank you. So in the statement of provincial interests with municipalities, of course, the need for agricultural land is a requirement in that. And if you look at Kings County, for example, the highest need for agricultural land is prioritized, and they have the highest protection of agricultural land. And again, I just go back to working with industry as we've done through the years. When it comes to the protection and ways that we can protect land going forward, we're happy to work with industry. We're happy to work with the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture. Through the Farm Loan Board, the Nova Scotia Farm Loan Board, we made the largest purchase in the Farm Loan Board's history at the Cape John Community Pasture. That's just one way that we can protect farmland and make it available for all farmers.
Okay, thank you. Liberal candidate.
There have been concerns from rural municipalities that the present government may overhaul planning regulations of the present municipal plans in which decisions of the council be eliminated from their directive following the province, allowing the province to take over the decision-making powers of the municipalities in order to approve developments on agricultural land. The Halifax Regional Municipality being one example of needing the zoning regulations and taking that responsibility out of the provincial hands of the municipal hands. The Liberal government understands that we need to strengthen the statement of provincial interest on agricultural land. They have fought against taking over municipal powers into provincial hands, an example being Kings County, where they have maintained those agricultural lands. Having the respect of the municipal authorities, municipal governments in decision-making in terms of planning and housing development.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks. So I think, first of all, it is really important to acknowledge that we have a province-wide housing crisis. And I think that's affecting where people can move, where people can start businesses, and where we get labor from, and other opportunities. So I think there is a housing crisis. And, you know, we really want to work with folks who need access to affordable housing. So we've announced some programs around support for non-market housing, for rebates for folks earning under $70,000 a year and paying mortgages or rent. And wholly think that the supply focus of the current government is not the only answer. It is not going to build adequately. And I guess I would be very concerned about the transparency of this government in terms of where development decisions are made. You know, I think we can look at scrapping the Coastal Protection Act as an example of where principles were set aside. The Federation asks and calls for the creation of an Agriculture Land Advisory Committee, and I think that this would be essential to have a province-wide perspective on agricultural land. We need to protect the agricultural land we have in transparent and community-based ways, and not have, you know, sort of one-off buying of land by the department or developers.
Thank you. Would anybody like to respond at this time?
There is a housing crisis, but we also need to feed if we're going to double the population within however many years that the PC government has chosen to double our population, we need a place to feed these people, rather than we need to know that we're sustainable in our own agricultural practices. So maybe we need to bring back that doubling the population decision to a more sustainable growth, which is equivalent to the investment of housing.
Thank you. Next question. Business risk management. Our business risk management programs, such as Agri-Insurance, Agri-Stability, Agri-Recovery, and Agri-Invest, have long struggled to meet the needs of Nova Scotia's diverse and multi-commodity farms. The support available under BRM programs is not going to be negotiated until 2028. Would you support the government developing a Made in Nova Scotia business risk management program to complement the shortfalls of the existing federal provincial programs? And we invite the Liberal candidate to speak first.
I would support a task force to look deeper into the question, to try to understand how these programs have become so overdeveloped and complicated that is not meeting the needs of Nova Scotia farmers. The Agri-Insurance and Agri-Recovery programs, or the Seasonal Response Program, have been stretched due to climate issues of frost or flood, and then having farmers fill out the complicated forms that possibly seem to value the larger farms. A Made in Nova Scotia program might be able to augment the federal, provincial, territorial program, but the existing 60-40 split of federal to provincial dollars, and then ask the province to again augment the shortfalls of the program. The Liberal government has stated in our platform that a Centre for Agriculture Ventures and Enterprises would include different levels of government, post-secondary institutions, and farmers to find innovative ways to support our farms. This could also incorporate the Agri-Invest program of the Business Risk Management Program. But again, taking a deep look into simplifying the program, the Liberal government would support a task force to possibly look back into the NISA program of the 90s, which was almost like an investment program for farmers.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks. So I think it's clear from what we're hearing from industry, what we hear from all of you, that there is really a need to consider how to stabilize the sector. And I think we would commit to looking at the development of a made in Nova Scotia approach. The need for integrated business risk management has been made clear to me when I talk to folks about, they're holding back from making investments that might, support season extension and that sort of thing because they're worried that they can't adequately insure them. And of course, it's not a matter of if, but when we see different effects of climate change. So you're not going to hold back on, you're not going to go forward with your investments if you can't be sure that you get the full coverage and adequate insurance in all cases. So I think this is really an essential part of signaling to farmers that we support farmers, that the government supports farmers, and that we need farmers as part of Nova Scotia's future and providing food security.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you. Look, I've heard about the challenges with BRM even before we had Fiona, before we had the polar vortex, before we had floods, before we had wildfires, before we had one of the wettest seasons on record last year. So it's been top of mind, and it is something we're working on. We, in collaboration with the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture, with industry, with commodity associations, we're willing, we're doing the work as we speak. It's probably the top priority because I can talk about the money that we've invested, $43 million over the last 2 years to respond directly to natural disasters. And that's great to show that we're there. But what industry wants is good insurance programs so that we don't need to provide that funding, so that they have that peace of mind, and we know that as a government we don't have to come back and do it. So would we support it? Well, yes, we're already doing it.
Thank you. Any response from the candidates? Okay, on to the next question. Balancing economic growth and climate change. You will hear farmers say you can't go green if you are in the red. Farmers are on the financial front lines when it comes to the impacts of climate change. How will your party actively engage with and provide meaningful support to the agricultural industry in its efforts to meet the goals outlined in the Environment and Climate Change Reduction Act? Specifically, what does the government need to do to help industry balance our environmental and climate goals while maintaining economic sustainability? And we offer the first response to the NDP candidate.
Thank you. And I think, as I said, agriculture is on the front lines of climate change. And so farmers can tell all Nova Scotians probably more about climate change than the average person. And so I think, it's not a question of if, it's a question of how we respond to climate change. And I think it's been clear to me that the sector is really engaged in these discussions, looking at some of the programs like the Living Labs, the use of science and technology to respond to the changing climate. So I think all of that's really important and really important to support as well. There's clear, things to think about in terms of soil health, water access and conservation, as well as how to respond to drought conditions. Also in terms of infrastructure, so looking at our dike infrastructure across the province and reinforcing that. So I think we have to support an integrated approach to climate change risk management for the resilience of the agriculture sector.
Go ahead. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. So obviously climate change is at the forefront of top of mind for industry. And it's such a key part of the fairly newly signed Canadian Agricultural Partnership, Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnerships, SCAP. And a big part of that is the Resilient Agricultural Landscape Program. That is a key component. We offer energy best management practice. Through that, we have the on-farm water management program. We work with Efficiency One, the Nova Scotia Department of Environment and Climate Change. We've had the Clean Tech program that's been highly popular. Our department has created a climate change and environmental sustainability division in the last number of years. We'll continue support for the Christmas tree, horticulture, and cattle and sheep industries as they implement their climate adaptation strategies. And we've enabled Perennia to develop more than 100 weather stations across the province that are so important to predictability and have been very popular among industry. And happy to look at other things going forward as well.
Thank you. Gwyn?
This question leads again to the Center of Agriculture Ventures and Enterprises, in which 3 levels of government, post-secondary education, and farmers can innovate to help build on the Agri-Invest program. Such a venture study climate change adaptations, the investment in rural roads and community transport for smarter logistics and safer roads. Transportation flow would decrease reliance on fossil fuels. Proclaiming the Coastal Protection Act was passed with all party support during the previous Liberal government, but the Houston government decided not to put claim not to claim it as the Nova Scotia Liberal MP met with respect the will of Nova Scotia and proclaimed the Coastal Protection Act. My apologies. I can implement the required regulations across the province. There's a typo. Sorry. And of course, we need to discuss the carbon tax. We know the federal carbon tax isn't right fit for Nova Scotia. From 2017 to 22, under the previous Liberal government, a cap and trade model worked to reduce emissions without punishing Nova Scotia, but then it was scrapped by the Houston government, resulting in the current consumer pricing system. Get rid of the carbon tax to ensure we're still doing our part to lower pollution, work with other Atlantic provinces to establish a cap and trade program that will reduce large industrial pollution that isn't expecting all consumers to pay for.
Thank you, Gwyn. Okay, any, yes, go ahead.
I just want to hop in because I do think that while this government started strong with the Environment and Climate Change Reduction Act, since then we've seen really a failure to rise to the occasion and address climate change in a way that protects Nova Scotian farms and farmers, as well as other key aspects of infrastructure. I think the government scrapping of the Coastal Protection Act in favor of listening to a handful of developers who own a lot of land on the South Shore is an example of how this government's actually out to support its friends and folks with money and developers. I think they've been, fighting Justin Trudeau over the carbon tax, but have offered no real other solution other than a PowerPoint that said better than the carbon tax. And then they went back and said still better than a carbon tax. And, we have some ideas about how to address affordability really quickly. And, we've talked about a gas tax holiday. We know that in the rural areas, people need to drive. And, this would immediately take the motor fuel tax off, as well as investments in rural transit and HST off of essentials. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Any other of our other candidates care to respond?
I'm just going to build again on something that was in the Liberal platform, in that the covenant restrictions of grocery stores, if we had a few more grocery stores in rural Canada, in rural Nova Scotia, then there wouldn't be a need to drive 45 minutes to get to your local grocery store. This, as well as having the roads so that when a person yawns and their vehicle wanders and you end up in a major pothole on the side of the road, has to be alleviated through the economic growth. Thank you.
Okay. That is it for our structured questions. We're now going to move to the floor, and we're going to start with an online question to allow the opportunity for folks in the room to come up to the mic. So if you have a question, now's the time to line up to the mic while we go to the online audience.
This question is from Patricia Bishop of Tap Group Farms in Kings County. What is your response to a loss in capacity of our soils in Nova Scotia? How will your party work to improve the health of our soils?
We offer the PC candidate the first opportunity to respond.
Soil health is so important. We do work with Perennia. We have specialists there. We offer the testing at our Truro Bible Hill location, and looking forward, we have a number of buckets through our Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership where we could do more with soil health, and we're happy to have those conversations in collaboration with industry.
Gwyn?
Having a few more areas where soil testing can be done, soil and water testing. A friend of mine is studying soil health and starting to study the inputs of soil health without the use of chemicals, but having her samples being sent to a soil testing site has been a little bit restrictive to her business. So having a few more research-based laboratories in the province would help a lot.
Lisa?
I mean, I think there's a need to consider having a provincial advisory committee on soil health. It's so essential for the resilience of the sector. And, you know, lots of farms are doing, you know, sort of amazing work in different parts of the sector in terms of looking at, you know, how to strengthen the health of their soil. You know, I attended a really interesting event at Lightfoot and Wolfville on soil regeneration, for instance. So lots of folks are doing really interesting work, and we need to be supporting that and sharing those lessons learned.
Do any of the candidates have a response? Okay. Kathleen, I see you at the mic, and I'm just clarifying that it's farmers only that are allowed to ask questions. So at this meeting, it's farmers only that are allowed to ask questions. Thank you. Anybody else in the room before we go back online?
I couldn't resist. John Vissers, Colchester County. The question I'd have to ask is that the pathology lab is shut down right now because of a major breakdown and made part of a reconstruction in it. But it's not the first time it's been shut down this year. It's been shut down a few other times with the mold and that. So I guess the question is, I understand that the property all belongs to the college, but the government leases it. And I guess to have adequate proper place in the future, is there any talks or would there be talks in getting the college and putting in new lab and maybe be able to increase it to be able to do things like avian flu and stuff? Because that's a thing that the industry's been requesting. So
Thank you, John. We'll offer our Liberal candidate the first opportunity to respond to that question.
Having the ability to have a center for innovation would probably be the first step in having research and laboratory facilities built in that, again, all three levels of government, post-secondary institutions and farmers can be involved in the Center for Ag Excellence. And I think this is an excellent opportunity to look at the lack of budget spending that has occurred over the last 3 years, in that the budget has remained static and with no increases. So I think that's probably just an excellent idea, is to build something that may or may not be specific to the university.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lisa.
I think, I've heard a lot of people express concerns around our ability to react quickly in this province to, emergent pathogens and viruses and that sort of thing, and certainly around avian flu capacity. So, I think we know it's really important to be able to identify issues really quickly and start to respond before things spread. So I think ensuring that there's adequate capacity in this province is really important.
Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you. So we know there's challenges with various pieces of infrastructure, whether it's provincial or with Dal AC, but we have a very good relationship, or have had a good relationship in the department with Dal AC. There's a new dean there. We had the opportunity to meet not long before the election, and would look forward to continuing that relationship, finding out what they need, how we can partner. And it doesn't just have to be the Department of Agriculture. We can look at other government departments, whether it's perhaps the Department of Justice would be looking at a new forensic lab, for example, and maybe that could be a key piece of, have a testing capacity for avian influenza in that case. Right now, we know that New Brunswick has a lab that it has a capacity to test for avian influenza, and that testing is done federally through the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, through CFIA. So they would direct where those samples will go, for example, but we'd be happy to have that conversation.
Thank you. Any response from the other candidates? Lisa?
Well, I guess I would just, really reflect on, the PC candidates making comments around having those conversations and connecting with industry. And one thing I've really been concerned about actually is that there's been a real lack of transparency and accountability in the relationship between this candidate as minister and the sector. And, I think about things like, the wine industry and grape growers and, what they had to go through to really be part of a more equal conversation going forward. And so I just, I think that's a really important part. Like, I have heard people's very real concerns about not having avian flu testing capacity in this province. But I don't see how this government is moving forward and being accountable and transparent with the sector.
Go ahead, Greg.
So I've obviously heard the concerns around AI. Went to a lot of chicken farms and heard various opinions. Whether, well, we need our own lab here in Nova Scotia. Well, we at least need to have more information from CFIA on how the samples are distributed and how testing is done. To, well, we're too small of a region to have our own lab here, where we have one in New Brunswick, where PEI is looking at expanding their lab to do it. And I'm not saying that we'll never have one in Nova Scotia, but we are a small region, and we have that testing capacity right now in the region. And as I mentioned, that's directed from CFIA. So, for example, if we did set up a lab here and there was outbreak in Quebec, they may send the Quebec samples here. We may not be first in line. Well, that's not up to us. That's up to CFIA, and we've set up those conversations with CFIA and industry, and we'll be happy to do it again.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go online to the next question.
Excuse me. Just before jumping into the next question and following the online discussion, I just wanted to clarify that there was an invitation to appear that was presented to the Green Party of Nova Scotia, but unfortunately Anthony Edmonds wasn't able to join at this time, but he did send his regrets and wishes that he was able to attend. So based on a question online, wanted to share with the room. In terms of a next question online, next question comes from Fraser Hunter of Noydot Farms. The present suite of taxpayer-funded government programs are not leading to a financially and environmentally sustainable primary ag industry in Nova Scotia. Without inflation, gross farm income is declining, net profit is seldom achieved. How would your party utilize taxpayers' dollars to stabilize the sustainability of the agriculture industry financially and environmentally in Nova Scotia?
Thank you. We offer the first opportunity to NDP candidate.
Thanks. I mean, I think this question gets to the heart of the issue, that the farmers and the sector have been asking for stable, predictable funding. And so, you know, when the minister talks about the 43 million that was year-end spending in response to emergencies, of course, it was needed, no question. But I think we can do things better in a way that offers the farmers of today a clear sense that this government is going to be there for them. They're going to invest in them. You know, we have a food and beverage strategy for which we have no update. It was a platform commitment. We have a Nova Scotia Loyal program that's not particularly loyal to Nova Scotia. And we know that, you know, when we think about succession planning and appealing to people entering the industry, it's much easier to do that when the finances of a farm are stable. So government needs to step up. And I really think we've been lacking in that leadership.
Okay, thank you. PC?
Thank you. I'd just say that of that $43 million, it was not all year-end spend. Fiona happened in September of 22, and we reacted within a week, and $19 million there through the department, through the province of Nova Scotia for support direct to industry that was very well received. We introduced the one stream application system that, you know, when I went on farms after Fiona, I went to a lot and saw the despair. And one of the big things we heard was, you know, we don't need to jump through a bunch of hoops. We don't need 80 pages of paperwork. You need to make it simple. And we did that. And we heard the gratitude for that. So I just wanted to mention that that was not a year-end spend, but we aren't afraid to spend. We spend when we need to. So if it's at the end of the year, it's at the end of the year. If it's the middle of the year, it's in the middle of the year. We've increased the budget. We increased SCAP. We're investing in industry. We're listening to industry. We're working with industry. We'll continue to do that, and happy to look at other ways. I mentioned a number of environmental aspects that we've funded and improved on, and our Environment and Climate Change Division within the department. There's so much good work that's happening, and it will continue.
Thank you. Gwyn? Anybody want to provide a response? Lisa? Good. Okay. We'll go to the room.
Jolene, Greg Archibald for Hill Peak Farmers Limited. I appreciate the feedback here today in the debate. One thing that maybe, and I'll preface it by saying I'm in the fortunate position right now to also be elected as chair for Dairy Farmers Nova Scotia. And I find in my years through this role, we tend to have a lot of rinse and repeat. And like even today, we're sitting here talking about finding mechanisms from tax dollars back. It's always this return policy to farming. One thing I have not heard of tonight at all is about processing. And I can speak to it from dairy, but I can speak to it from a commodity sense from a lot of groups right now. We ship a pile of product out of this province to have it processed. We pay to send that product out to have it processed. We talk about grocery stores being local again, which I'm not denying is a good idea, but we've got to pay just to get it there to even get the product back to this province to do it. We talk about this viability piece, but until we have efficient, up-to-date current processing across the sector, we're stumbling right now. So it's kind of a two-part question of this is, one, how do we get there? And two, instead of always incentivizing them to come and bring dollars back, at what point in time do we sit down as an industry and say, what is our strategic plan in these initiatives? You know, we work well with the Federation right now, and this is what we're missing right now is, and it's as much on us as it is on you guys, but at what point do we sit down and actually agree on what we're trying to internalize and make a plan for? I'd love to hear proposals in both of those, because every time you rely on government to feed money back, we're just going to keep in this cycle and be reliant to that. So love to hear some feedback on those initiatives and where it would go.
Thank you. Go ahead, Greg. Yep.
And thanks, Greg, for the question. we know processing capacity is a challenge right across the province. Dairy being no different. I know that I can't speak to specific details, but we've had those conversations about bringing some of that capacity back to Nova Scotia, and was very encouraged by that, and would hope that we'd have some good news going forward. But in terms of how we can break that chain, like you said, it's not just on us. It's on everybody in this room. We've shown over the last 3 years we can collaborate. We'll listen and we'll work together.
Thank you. Gwyn?
When milk is shipped, if the farmer's dairy cannot accept that milk, it has to go to Quebec. There are so many trucks going to Quebec, and they have to find a reason to get to Montreal to buy sugar to bring it back to Oxford blueberries. There's so much, I won't call it waste, but a lot of effort to get our milk and milk products and a lot of other commodities that are moving out of the province in order to get processed. You're exactly right, Greg, that processing within the province should be something that we don't have to pay to send it out of the province to pay to bring it back to the province. There's too much, I'm not sure of the word to use, but if we could have our products stay in the province a little bit longer and then export it as a value-added product, then maybe we should look at increasing our own production processes within the province. That's a very good question, Greg. I like that.
Go ahead, Lisa.
And I would agree. I think processing is a huge issue and a huge opportunity. So both abattoir capacity, processing of horticultural products, of fruit and veg. I think we've lost a lot of capacity in the province over the last 30 years. And, I had hoped that a strategy for increased processing at a local level would be part of the food and beverage strategy. And I would invite the minister to offer any update on the food and beverage strategy that he may be able to provide, or the PC candidate. And I would have also thought that a Nova Scotia Loyal program would have worked towards this. So, one of the things that I have done is actually worked with firemen in the Annapolis Valley and, started conversations with Feed Nova Scotia, with an organization called Metro Works that has the ability to do commercial kitchen production, and with senior centers to have an output so that things won't be left in the ground and in the fields that we know could feed Nova Scotians at a time of rising food insecurity.
Thank you, Lisa. Would you like to respond?
The Nova Scotia Food and Beverage Strategy is a complex initiative. It's not just the Department of Agriculture. It's an all-of-government approach, an all-of-government lift. There's 12 departments involved in it. We went to the public. We received more than 1,900 responses, and we're very thankful for that. But in lieu of launching the strategy, we're not waiting. We're not waiting for a report. We're not sitting around. A key part of the strategy was the Universal School Lunch Program. We've implemented that. It started. It's underway. Institutional procurement is part of that food and beverage strategy, and we've seen success at Northwood, the largest long-term care facility in the Atlantic region, at the IWK, the largest children's health hospital in the Atlantic region, through various regional centers for education with the Fresh Food Cart program. So the food and beverage strategy is an important document, but we're not waiting for a document. We've taken action, and we've been successful.
Gwyn?
I'm just wondering if the procurement of the foods for the hospitals and schools that he mentioned are actually Nova Scotia products.
I'll list as an example, yes. So yes, the funding that's been provided through the institutional procurement project has been to help institutions overcome some of those hurdles to buying local, and as Northwood, for an example, at the time before the pilot project started, was buying at a rate of 18%. And after the 3-month pilot, we saw it up to 21%. So a 3% increase might not sound like a lot, but is a change in pattern, a change in behavior. And again, talking about the largest long-term care facility in the Atlantic region, that's not insignificant.
Sure. Go ahead.
And I mean, I guess I'd like to go back to the school food program, which, you know, is something that the NDP has long fought for, along with numerous PTAs and community groups across the province. But it's really not clear what the commitment is to local procurement within that. And perhaps there could be some clarity on that.
We have an institutional procurement specialist who is dedicated to that solely in the department. She does great work. The NDP say they advocated for the school food program, school lunch program, but when push came to shove, they voted against it.
Okay. We're going to move on to the next question. Online audience, and then after that question, you, Danny, okay?
Excuse me, our next question online from Jeffrey Orr of Six Season Farm in Antigonish County. The wild blueberry industry is the province's largest agricultural export and provides many direct and spin-off jobs in some of the most economically challenging parts of rural Nova Scotia. Our industry has experienced 2 years of very difficult times with field prices well below the cost of production. Many growers and related service industries are teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. What are your thoughts on this crisis, and what will your party do to support our industry?
And we offer the Liberal candidate the first option to respond. Okay. NDP, Lisa?
Well, I think, you know, I mean, part of this, like this market instability is not just, doesn't just affect blueberries, obviously. And I think there are some sort of sustainable sector-wide approaches that could help stabilize in this case. So some things would be, for instance, no interest loans. So often when the market is flooded, folks don't actually know what your farm returns are going to be until actually after the bills are due, right? So, I mean, having access to no interest loans, I think increasing our capacity to process and to think about what value added products could be developed. And I think, you know, I guess it's just a document, but I mean, actually having a transparent approach to the food and beverage strategy, as well as a real Nova Scotia loyal program, not the one that we currently have, could all be parts of trying to steady the industry.
Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, we know how important the wild blueberry sector is to our province, what it means to export, what it means to the economy. Always working with all the players, big, medium, and small, working with the sector. There's opportunities around value added. Through the Farm Loan Board, we supported a new large processing facility in the province. We have different programs that we can do provincially or through SCAP, or you know, I've advocated with the COA for more support with the industry, because there's you know, bigger pot of money there. So again, happy to work with industry and you know, develop programs that may help it succeed going forward.
Thank you. Gwyn, are you good?
I think that's where we come first full circle, in that we're discussing the business risk management program and seeing that the agri insurance and agri recovery and seasonal programs are not finalizing the money back to the farmer in response to these issues. So I think we've already discussed that maybe the whole agri insurance and business risk management programs have to be rethought.
Any response from the other two candidates? Okay, we'll go back to the floor. Danny?
Danny King at Six Maples Farm, Antigonish. Starting off, commending to the Liberal Party. I'm going through the online and looking at the different mandates, and they're the only party that actually mentions agriculture in their mandates online. But the question I do have is, within the Liberal Party, they mentioned something here. They're saying we will develop a Center for Agriculture Ventures and enterprises that will bring together different levels of government, post-secondary institutions, and farmers to find innovative ways to support our farms. So question number one, we've been here all evening and I haven't heard anything about this, and it's the only thing on your website. And two, could you explain what it is? And the last would be for the other parties to see what things are going to do similar to this program set out online here for the Nova Scotia Liberal Party.
Okay, we're going to go to NDP first. Or do you want to, have I mixed up the order? That's okay, go ahead.
So the Center for Agricultural, can't even think of the words right now, institution using the government and post-secondary institutions and farmers to develop a center for something where research can happen in order to come up with ideas and products. And there's a program with Ocean Ventures Enterprises, but maybe agriculture needs a center for agricultural ventures and enterprises, in that all of these levels are coming up with ideas and solutions through research in order to help the farmers do the job, day-to-day jobs. Was there more to that question?
Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
And, I think to build on that, so I think Cove is a great example. It's located in Dartmouth, and it provides a hub for folks in the ocean industry, the blue economy, to work together, to share infrastructure, to test new products, that sort of thing. I do sense that perhaps a lot of that capacity is at the Agriculture College or Dal Agriculture. And so I think this makes sense because I've really seen the value of the Cove initiative. But I think we need to look at what already exists and build on that. I think Perennia is a really important part of the puzzle in Nova Scotia. We were disappointed to see it, along with just about every other Crown corporation, lose its independence and become minister directed. I think it's really important that we have arms-like government bodies. And I know that there are some concerns now with the new model with Perennia that some farmers just aren't able to afford those extension services. So I think there is a need to, look at strengthening this sector. I mean, this is what we've been talking about all night long, right? Like a clear commitment to growing this sector for the future of Nova Scotia.
Thank you. Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you. And thank you, Danny, for the question. When it comes to these types of things, I don't think we necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. We talked about Dal AC, and of course, as John mentioned, there's infrastructure challenges there. We can, those are things that we look at. We talked about working with different departments so that we have some of that capacity or knowledge more closely at hand. My counterpart mentioned Perennia and the great work that they do there. There's great ideas coming from Perennia. And just in terms of the platform, just because, the platform is very high level. I've mentioned a number of items throughout the evening where we've shown our commitment to industry, and we want to continue supporting the industry going forward. Just because it's, it's not in a very high level platform, it doesn't mean that it's not important. We've done our best to show that it is, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. Does anybody have a response? We're good? Okay.
I think we're at the point where maybe we do have to reinvent the wheel.
Thank you. Back to online for our next question. Yep. We're almost there, folks. Couple more.
In 2023, Tom Cosman and Wood Honey Limited. In 2023, the excessively wet summer led to very poor crops for farmers in many different branches of agriculture. The government responded with seasonal response program, which delivered compensation to some farmers for crop losses and nothing at all to farmers of other crops that were badly damaged by the same weather conditions. Can you speak to why and how programs could be equitable across the industry?
You can start, Greg. Yep.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Tom, for the question. So, season response was meant to be a gap program to fill in the gaps where BRM may have lagged, where there weren't other supports available. For example, someone that had the opportunity to purchase a BRM insurance program wouldn't be compensated at the same rate that someone who had that insurance purchase. So. That being said, obviously it led to a lot of discussion around the efficiency of BRM programs, and we've talked about that at length tonight, and I take that to heart. Know how important it is to industry to have that stable support going forward, and we've started that work, and we look forward to continuing it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Gwyn.
I think with the honey industry, there may have been some issues in that some farmers in the honey industry did not benefit from the seasonal program because they didn't lose bees. What they lost was honey. So the bees had no flowers to go to. The bees had no blossoms to find and to produce the honey, but yet the seasonal program missed that because it wasn't a loss of bees that the honey producers struggled from. It was the loss of actual honey. No flowers, no honey.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I think again, obviously that program was important, and but I think there were a lot of concerns about how it was administrated. And I will just say that I, received calls from farmers who were concerned about the timeliness of the decision and the adequacy of decisions that were made. And other folks had things clawed back. So it was a bit of a mess, really, in its administration. And, the PC candidate refers to, it was a gap measure. And this is where I really think, we need to get beyond gap measures. We need to find a way to provide stability and support to the agriculture sector while we're also building the agricultural sector through things like processing, through things, yes, like a food and beverage strategy, because the lack of transparency around this surely is frustrating. And, a real loyalty program that supports farmers, that supports local consumption, that increases food security, not the sham of the Nova Scotia oil that we've been presented with.
Would you like to respond? Gwyn? No? Okay. Question in the room.
Alphonse Vermeulen, Vermeulen Agricultural Company in Hants County. Then the time and money on the farm are always scarce resources, and all of the programs and initiatives taken on by the government require time and money of the farmer on the ground. How would you set up programs to make sure that you're not crowding out the farmers' efforts to make the Nova Scotia more competitive in the future for their own operation?
Thank you. Gwyn, would you like to take first crack?
Are you asking that rather than the farmer taking time out of the farm to do the work, that someone comes to the farm, like an agricultural representative come to the farm? Yeah, I'm not exactly sure I could answer that. Come back to me.
Greg, you want to take it?
Thanks for the question. I would agree 100% that programs need to be made easier. That's been a problem for a number of years. You know, I've said that in the past, it seemed like programs were designed to start with a no and maybe get to a yes. And my philosophy has been, let's start with a yes, and maybe for some reason you have to get back to a no. There's got to be parameters, of course, everybody knows that. But we don't want industry jumping through hoops. And I talked about a response after Fiona. We did the one stream system, and in the past, I asked the department, same approach, make it easier. You guys work 14-hour days. You don't want to come in and sit by the computer for 3 hours and go through 80 pages of paperwork. You want it to be easy. Again, there have to be parameters, but let's make it easier for industry to access these programs, because that's what they're there for. And one thing that we've done as well that industry asked for was the reinstatement of the ag reps, and that's a big part of their role as well. Again, we don't expect you guys to spend 3 hours a day looking through all the different programs that might be available. We want the ag reps to go out there, tell you what's available, how it might work for you. Maybe this program doesn't work for you, and give you the head start on that.
Thank you, Greg. Go ahead, Lisa.
I think what one of the things I would say about that too is, you know, sort of government getting out of the way. I also think that starts with having trust in the relationship with government, and that government will be respectful, transparent, and accountable. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, I think we saw an example with the wine producers and grape growers of Nova Scotia, who really had to fight to have their voices heard over special interests. You know, so I think, you know, first of all, that relationship has to be there. And then, you know, what I think needs to happen is, again, you know, the various one-off programs have been important, but I think there's a better way of doing things that ideally would reduce the red tape in administration.
Thank you. Any response?
Again, we go back to the ag rep program. If Perennia were able to get to farms a little more easily, working with the farms, I agree with you that there needs to be a program that resembles the ag rep of days of old, in that there's somebody to help you with that paperwork, because that paperwork takes up a lot of time. And I mean, coming from the dairy industry, and just a matter of clocking the time on whether your milk is cold or how long, yeah, all of that type of work should be done by someone else. I agree with the bringing back the ag rep program, and maybe we work with Perennia to do that.
I'll offer again a response, opportunity to respond. Okay, back to online.
Next question is from Lauren Park, Cosman and Wood and Honey, Kings Hants County. Will your party commit to working with industry to develop an industry-led government-supported strategy to realize the potential of our industry?
And the first opportunity to respond is the NDP candidate.
Absolutely. And that's an easy one to respond to, because I think, you know, I've seen the damage that the current government's approach has had in the relationships with the sector. I've seen the lack of a strategy, a lack of a vision for this sector, and we need to move past that, move past being reactive. And like I said, the various like industry groups in this sector are amazing and so well connected to their members, and is so good at engaging with government that we have really good relationships to build on. So I think absolutely we would look at how we can make Nova Scotia a great place to farm, and a great place to farm in the future.
Thank you, Lisa. Greg?
Absolutely as well. We're happy to work with any industry group, commodity organization. And a specific example would be our hive replacement program that we announced. That was done in collaboration with industry, and it doubled the support for the industry with this year's program.
Thank you. Go ahead, Gwyn.
Having a marketing and communications background, I feel like the Nova Scotia Loyal Program could be something that is worth be proud of. So going back and actually marketing that as a Nova Scotia product so that it's branded properly. I mean, you look at 15 years ago when PEI Cattlemen's went to the marketing firm in Charlottetown and did PEI Burger Week. That in itself has increased beef sales in Prince Edward Island immensely. I don't know the numbers on that, but it's still going strong. So we need to focus on loyal products like that and use a marketing firm to the benefit to brand products so that we can have something that is, you know, in 15 years time, are we going to look back and go, oh, I remember that, honey, that jingle on what product? I think we need to actually work on branding our products a little bit further.
And offer the opportunity for response. Okay. I'm going to take one more from the floor. Frank?
Frank Schenkel, Scawthorne Farms. This one's maybe a little more philosophical on how you see government working. There's a lot of boards, agencies, commissions that fill a role that give the farm community or other communities in the public input into the government. And over the past number of years, lots of those boards positions have not been filled. The government has left them open. I don't know why. Doesn't seem like it'd be a hard thing to do to keep it. And I'm thinking of a livestock health services board, which is close to me. Positions haven't been filled for 2-3 years. Doesn't seem that hard for me to why those don't get filled. Doesn't cost, doesn't take any new legislation. So I guess for all three people up there, how committed is your party to running government the way it has been in the past with input from grassroots through those agencies, boards, commissions?
Thank you, Frank. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Frank, for the question, and I share your frustration. Believe me, I see those boards with vacancies through the years, and you know, there's screening processes. There's certain times of year that applications are open, so it can be difficult. But I agree. I've asked many times, why can't we just do this quicker? And we've gotten to a point where we have filled many of those spots across various ABCs. You know, some of those agencies, boards, and commissions didn't even have members for quorum. That's embarrassing. But we've got, I believe all of them now at least have enough members to function. We made a number of appointments the last few months, and going forward, it would continue to be a thorn in my side, and I'd look for ways to streamline that for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. We'll go to Gwyn next.
The last I heard, some of those ABC positions hadn't been filled, but if he's saying recently they have, that's great. I think we need to look at who is involved in agriculture that is, do we need to diversify our government in that, so the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture is one of those people that becomes a board member filler? And so do we have to diversify all of our boards and the people that are involved in them and try and get them to more of a national level than just the local level? I just came back from the Fairs and Exhibitions Conference, and same type of thing. Finding the board members to sit on a national program has been an issue. And it's all based on, where are the volunteers? Where are the people that are willing to go above and beyond? But many people are still back on the farm. They're trying to make a go of making the farm profitable. They don't have time to go and become a board member. But, and that brings us back to farmers need to succeed they need profit in order to succeed.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lisa.
I think, I guess I have sort of two perspectives on this response. One is that, I've certainly heard time and time again about why those spots have been vacant and why those ABCs have not been functional. And I think it's disingenuous for the minister or the former minister to imply that there was no control over that, because I've been involved in ABC process appointments in government, and certainly that could have been overcome. And I think that for us, we really value hearing from Nova Scotians. I mean, this is an important cornerstone, but at the same time, I recognize that, Nova Scotians are stretched and farmers are stretched. And so, our desire to be engaged in our community in different ways and to be volunteers is actually becoming more difficult. Folks are on the farm, folks have another job or another couple of jobs that they need to have to maintain, to support their family. So I think it's absolutely essential. And I think that we also need to, stabilize the industry and stabilize folks' income and support people to be able to be part of those important community discussions.
Thank you, Lisa. Giving the opportunity for a response from any of the candidates. Okay, going online.
Got two questions, just pulling them up here. Sorry, jumping back and forth. The next question is from Jack Thompson, Westboro Holsteins, Antigonish. Nova Scotia has tremendous potential to produce more of the beef that Nova Scotians consume. Could the candidates comment specifically on how they will build capacity within the beef industry to profitably meet this shortfall?
Okay, we're going to go to our Liberal candidate.
There are several beef farmers in the province that they're all looking for a place to process their animals. And so the plant in Prince Edward Island was supposed to be the be all end all. And yet again, it doesn't seem to be. So maybe we need to focus on another processing site within Nova Scotia that can fill those voids. The beef industry in Nova Scotia could also ramp up. There's a lot of agricultural land that is not being used that could be used for the beef industry for pasture programs and such like that. I really do think that having a better beef industry in Nova Scotia would really help with the local product as well, the Nova Scotia loyal product.
Thank you. Lisa?
I think one key part is on processing and abattoir capacity. So I think, I've heard concerns about how hard it is, especially for smaller farms to get their cattle in. So I think that that's a really important piece. And as well, I think beef farmers are also, faced with the ravages of climate change. So whether it's too wet or too dry, and climate change in general. So I think again, a more stable approach, so folks know going into a season that whatever happens with the weather, that, whether they can access no interest loans, that they're adequately insured. And then at the end of the season, when it's time to process, that they have a place where they can take their product.
Thank you. Greg?
Thanks, Jack, for the question. Very proud to announce the Nova Scotia Beef Initiative recently. So, we've invested a little less than $1 million over 2 years to look at things like marketing, research and development, ways to build the industry going forward. And obviously, more work to do, but Perennia has been involved with that. We have beef specialists there that took a group to the UK on an educational mission to find out what they do there. Processing capacity, again, we've talked about that a number of times. It is a concern. One of the things we're doing is training more meat cutters through DALAC, offering a course through that. In terms of Atlantic beef, I talked earlier about a few different things where we are a small region. We don't necessarily each need our own thing. And in talking to Atlantic beef, I've been on a tour there. I've worked with Bruce and his team. They say they have the capacity for what we want to do here. So, you know, we're not looking at another standalone facility in Nova Scotia. Would love to be at the point where we could do that and where we could look at investing. But right now, Atlantic beef does have the capacity. We've invested in community pastures that beef farmers can use. And we have the beef steering committee. So I've said a few times about how industry helps us shape what we do. We have department staff working with industry, with the Cattlemen Association, Cattle Producers Association to help develop that strategy going forward.
Thank you. Response, Gwyn?
We also have Nepan Station, beef station, that there are requests from across Canada for Nova Scotia product beef bulls to go across the country. And using the data, there should be more involvement with the program of the research station in order to promote the product of beef itself within the province and across Canada.
Thank you. Any other responses? Okay, Carolyn, one more question.
Yeah, we're going to wrap up with a question from in the room. So I think that we all know that family or farming is a family affair often. So we have a young farmer, future farmer here that would like to ask a question to the candidates.
Lillian McDonald, Sunny Croftland and Milford. What does farming look like in 25 years? What does farming for me look like in 25 years?
Thank you. Lisa?
I love this question.
Mm.
You know, and I think, first of all, we all can have a vision of what that would look like. But I think, you know, what farming looks like in 25 years is that, you know, farmers feel secure each year and knowing that whatever they face in terms of climate and other emergencies, that they can have a stable income, that they can support their families. I think the other thing I would look forward to see is a lot of new farmers too. So over those 25 years, you know, we need to be, you know, bringing new farmers into the sector. And I think that's done when we have a vibrant, stable sector.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I've never been afraid to say I don't know, and I don't necessarily know what farming will look like in 25 years, but I sure hope that you're part of what it looks like. I love the engagement. I hope that programs that we do, like agriculture in the classroom, you know, through Ag Literacy Month, you know, planting seeds. I hope that stuff piques not just your interest. I know you have an interest. You wouldn't be here otherwise, unless someone told you had to be here. But it piques your classmates' interests, and we get that next generation at the grassroots level much earlier than, like I said, than I had an opportunity to learn about it when I was your age or even a little older. We do want to see a farming sector that is more resilient to climate change. We know it's happening. God knows what it'll look like in 25 years. It's been you know, a difficult 2 years. So we want to make sure that that the industry is protected going forward, and I've mentioned a number of ways that as a government we've done that. Yeah, I just really appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Go ahead, Gwyn.
In 25 years, I would like to know that the industries that we have right now are beautiful. Everything's easy peasy. Of course, it's not going to work that way. But I would also like to know that some of the small farms, the homesteaders that are in our province that are having to have a second job in order to make ends meet, that an off-farm job, that they can have 15 beef cattle that they've gotten genetics from the Nepan station and then are sending it over to the local producer processing unit to get that into the market. I think I would like to see the small farm not have to become the large farm so that we have a little bit more diversity in the region that we have. Thanks for the good question, Lillian.
And is there any response from the other candidates? If not, I think that concludes the structured part of our event. Thank you to the candidates for being very civil and making my job easy. And thank you to the audience for coming and for those online. And I will pass over final comments to Alicia.
Want to congratulate Jolene for not falling off the edge of the stage. That was one of the key components to starting. No, there's not. Even for my little feet. So I think first of all, I would just like to thank everybody for coming out here tonight. Thank you to the candidates for joining us today and contributing to this discussion. It's a big discussion. There's a lot of topics that can be covered, and I think we did a really good job of hitting most of the highlights. Your perspectives on the future of agriculture in Nova Scotia are critically important. You're going to help us make the changes that we need to see, so we do appreciate your time. Special thank you to Jolene tonight for guiding this conversation very skillfully, and only one joke was had, I think. We don't need her to do more right now. To all of our participants, young, old, all commodity representatives, and just to everybody for taking time out of their evening online or in person. It was really great to be able to share this important conversation. We look forward to continuing it in future discussions following the election. So actually next Tuesday during our AGM, I guess we'll all be able to reveal the results. So agriculture does need to maintain top priority in all of our efforts as we feed communities and support all of our local rural economies. The formal part is ended, but we invite everybody to stick around for, I don't have a watch, until about 9 o'clock. We have this room, so probably about another 15 or 20 minutes. So if everybody wants to just sort of network around, I just want to thank you all again and have a great evening, and remember to drive safe, and hopefully we'll see you, most of you, again next week during our AGM. Thank you.